I'm doing all right.
Good.
How about yourself?
Doing well, thank you. I haven't listened to the most recent RCAS, but
Oh,
last week during collab, we have a consensus session, and square root
yeah.
was the hot topic of discussion. So we've got a group of us
Oh, good.
well working through the concepts. So yeah, it's all good.
Cool. Yeah, I had a friend of mine from Amazon who also listened and said he just loved it. He
Yeah.
was like riffing on the idea, and yeah.
Yeah, now that the
Uh,
transcript is out, I always like to wait for the transcripts to come out. Now I'm ready to sit down, spend some time and watch it.
yeah, the transcript has some typos in it, or I don't know if they're speakos or typos, but anyway, there's some errors in the transcript.
Okay.
I want to get right permission to go and fix them.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, is Kent here? I can't see because.
Yes, Kent has arrived.
All right. Good. All right, Kent, you want to give an update?
Sure.
Awesome. Yeah.
So the the bonding demo is done. It is done using Python API on the client. So
Hey,
actually,
Greg, you want to put yourself on mute? We're hearing some wind or breathing on your mic. There we go. Thank you. Sorry, Kent.
yes. So it uses the Python API on the client side. So it's no longer using any of the R nodes client calls, which was more of a hack before. So that's nice.
Which API?
The PyRchain, um, essentially, it's just one of the gRPC client APIs that um, can be auto-generated from the protobuf spec.
Okay. Does that mean it's subject to some of the issues that the wait for listen at name for data?
Yes, it is a polling based API,
I see.
which in this case is, I guess yeah, like it will, yeah, it has that. If the node is busy, then yeah, it will have issues where it won't return immediately.
Got it. So does that need to use that API, or can we? Um, what made you make that choice? Why was that a good choice?
Well, it was a improvement over having it bundled with our node because, well, previously we basically had the same thing, but it wasn't, or we have a lot of calls in the R-node client that make it rather bloated. And
Oh, I see. This is just a factorization issue. You wanted a
yeah,
slender R-node client so that you could. Okay.
and also making it part of R-node makes it wasn't really a, I guess in some sense it wasn't a DApp. Now it feels more like a normal DApp, even though the
But I think of bonding as not a DApp, but like an essential feature or function of the node.
exactly. And so it's really nice that it's DApp-like, because yeah, like I guess in some sense, the only restriction is that it needs to be proposed by a validator.
Right.
Or the proof of stake contract needs to be executed by a validator.
Right.
And so like your transaction to bond will not be processed unless a certain validator accepts it in some sense. But besides that, there's nothing really privileged about the effective bonding.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, understood. Cool. So you're going to give the demo on Wednesday?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, that's awesome. Any other updates?
Vlad is on the line as well.
Oh, awesome. Vlad, glad to see that you're here.
Hey, everyone. Sorry about keeping quiet so far. I've got a lot of background noise walking around. Soon I should get to a little bit more quiet area.
Hey,
Cool.
Vlad. Are you at Web3?
I'm not at Web3 at the moment, but I'm in Berlin and I'm going to be at Web3 shortly.
Okay. I just sent you a very important email regarding one of our developers who just landed in Berlin. When you're
Cool.
done with this, can you respond to me?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
Where do you send it? Anyways, message me. Well, message me. I'll check.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, while you're waiting for a place that's more quiet, I can give a quick update. So, as Steve pointed out, Vlad, I don't know if you heard Steve, but the last RCast sort of explains the calculation for the square root. So, if you're interested, go check it out. I've had several colleagues check it out, and they agree that it does actually work. And there is in there a little tiny baby distributed consensus algorithm, leaderless, that is necessary in order for the square root calculation to work. Mike's stake came up this past Thursday, and we did a whole bunch of work on some work I reported on about 2 years ago, summer of 2017, where I was describing another form of derivative. So we found a small issue with that derivative and fixed that, and then noticed that if you make another transformation on that derivative, then you get then you get something that allows you to do both the maps reflect and reify, which are important, because the reason I was looking at that particular form of derivative is to come up with a sufficient set of rewrite rules that allow you to restrict attention on the rewrite rules for ladle. So once you know that you can encode all computational dynamics in rewrite rules of this kind, you can kind of not look at other rewrite systems. And this is important because you get, well, there are two reasons. It's important because now you get a lot more information in the rewrite rules about the structure of the rewrite rules, and the other thing is that it's derivative related. So basically, there's only so now you have an operation on the form of the data type that gives you information about its dynamics. So we're honing the structure function relationship is one that's really it's essential. If you look at lambda and pi and rho and ambient and all those kinds of calculi, one of the things that's really interesting is that the structure function relationship has very specific properties. Sort of it's what you see, what you get. It's not like the Java virtual machine where when you're staring at a piece of code, you still don't know how it executes unless you know something about yours and the thread count and all of that. So, but with lambda and pi, the structure of the term determines entirely its function. And here we know that information, but you can't know that from the type of the term constructors. You can't know that directly from the type constructor for the terms. But with this new derivative format for the rewrite rules, you get to know everything from just from structural inspection, and that's now we're starting to get some good properties. And so so I have written up the calculations. We'll probably do an RCast to explain the calculations, but it's part of a program that Mike and I have been pursuing now, where once you see the no-go theorems for distributive laws, you realize that it's only set-like collections. So sets, multi-sets, distributions, things like that will support a distributive law. And so then the question is, so that would mean that you only get Kyre style types, like you see in the spatial behavioral logic or in namespace logic. And either of those would be the only kind of types that you get. But we know that there's another class of types called session types. And so the question is, what's the relationship between those two kinds of types? And there's an answer, and the answer is that in the Kyre types, the negation is not folded in to the execution, whereas in the case of session types, the negation is folded into or interdefined in terms of execution. And if you restrict your rewrite rules to this format, then the aim and the hope is that we can give a generic lifting of all of that construction. It's essentially
So,
taking.
so just to see if I understand, is a session type kind of like maybe like a, a behavioral type that can only be verified during runtime, or
No. It's what the session types do is they make it easier to do deadlock freedom. You can do deadlock freedom in the Kairos types, but it's more complicated. In the session types, you're essentially getting this this linear match of inputs and outputs, so that you get deadlock freedom properties and other kinds of properties that are associated with a balanced execution. It essentially describes sessions, right? I open up a session, or it's like opening up a session with a database, or opening up a session with some other kind of resource like mouse events or things like that, and those sessions are almost always balanced in a particular way. There's always an open and a corresponding close, and there's just a certain disciplined use of the resource that makes sense when you think about it. You can look at Abramsky's construction for classical linear logic with his realizability notion. And when you look at the way he does negation and its relationship to cut, which is how you form the rewrite, right? So that's the clue, is that negation is connected to cut, and cut is how you make red X's. And so the question is, can you generalize that so it's not specific to his proof expressions? And the derivative construction makes it possible to take term languages that have a particular shape, and it's not a very onerous shape, right? So lots and lots of term languages fit this shape. So you get to take term languages that fit this shape and do two transformations. One punches holes in the data type, and the other turns those holes into named locations and makes a kind of lambda abstraction on those names available at the type level. So you can punch holes, abstract over them, and then fill the holes. So you get reflect and reify at the type level. And this is all done, automatically. There's no guesswork. There's no human intelligence required. You hand me the type of your term language, the data type that describes your term language, and I can give you back a data type that has these properties, which allows me to now write your rewrite rules in this way, and then that allows me to, fingers crossed, allows me to do generalize the Abramsky construction. And the reason why it's very promising that you can generalize the Abramsky construction is because of this. It's the same magic I use in R space. So the trick with R space was to recognize that excluded middle is realized in terms of call CC. So call CC is this continuation-based operator. So it turns out that there's this direct relationship between involuted negation and control, a certain kind of control that is a certain higher order control. And sorry, hang on a second. Anyway, I'll give more update in RCast. Why don't you go ahead, Vlad?
Sure. So kind of what it sounded like you were saying is that like you can give some kind of type system that is able to talk about like specific pieces of the term or specific kind of like take out and like isolate different characteristics of the terms that you're interested in and like ignoring the other ones as opposed to giving like a type system that's like fully describes the whole term, for example. But yeah, I guess
No,
just like,
it's different than that. It's about how to force the execution model to have a very specific shape, so that that shape supports well, the Abramski construction automatically gives you deadlock freedom. So you get this very expressive type system for ensuring properties about execution that have to do with balanced execution. Essentially, this is the notion of sessions. So we have a way to sort of generically represent sessions. That's one way to talk about it.
okay, cool.
Yeah. And the important point is that then, again, it's not like there are these two kinds of type systems, Kairos style types and session types. There's one type system, and it depends on which negation you want to support. Do you want the negation to be sort of at the collection level, or do you want the negation to be at the, in terms of the execution model? So that's that it's like it's much better to have sort of one nomenclature rather than, or one framework, one conceptual framework rather than two. But anyway, why don't you you take it away? I've been yammering on for too long.
Vlad, you're on mute if you're trying to speak.
Sorry, I need 1 second.
While we're waiting for Vlad, Kent, did that make sense? Did that description make sense to you?
Yeah, in terms of it's, I guess I still don't understand the gap between why having these types is like a session. I see why it could be helpful in preventing deadlocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a term of art from the literature. Initially it started out as types controlling message flow over a matched pair of ports, and so that's why it was thought of as a session. And then you could extend this to over multiple ports where the matched pairs were sessions as opposed to a single session. Does that make sense? So think of like, you've got a X negative and X positive, right? And they're channel, they're two ends of a channel, and the session describes all the legal conversations over that channel. So for example, in terms of mouse events, you have the down click, and then a bunch of motion events, and then an up click. And that's the only kind of conversation that's reasonable on the mouse channel. you won't recognize, like if you're trying to have you know, a pick up and move operation, that's the type for pick up and move.
Okay.
And that would be the session over the mouse channel. Vlad, are you back? Are you able to give us an update? My puppy really wants me to run with her right now. She's grabbing the leash and shaking it and saying, "Let's run."
Hey guys.
Hey.
Sorry about that. I just had to go into the elevator and let someone in. But now I'm in this quiet area, and I should be able to, have a call. I'm be uninterrupted now. Do you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Great. So last a couple weeks ago, I started sharing some of my updates about Byzantine fault or type fault tolerance analysis, and kind of how I can do, or like explicitly, formally do some kind of a fault tolerance analysis that we've been doing kind of philosophically with informal kind of motivation. And I described a little bit the liveness strategy, and I was hoping I would just spend more time this week on talking about liveness. And maybe hear from you guys what your state is on the liveness stuff in terms of, validator strategies and liveness groups. So how does that sound?
Just a quick comment in terms of liveness.
Yes, that's
we currently don't have any liveness strategy assumed. We allow validators to propose whenever they want. And yeah, we were going to let simulations.
That's good. Oh no. We have a strategy. We just haven't implemented it, right? This is the whole error correcting code. I've just been waiting for us to get all the other stuff done, and then I'll give you a pseudocode spec for the error correcting code stuff.
Sure, but
I remember the error correcting code stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that stuff. The main issue that I had with that stuff is the in protocol fault tolerance threshold. Although it is very elegant and very correct.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So you and I had a interesting difference of opinion on the in protocol fault tolerance. That's right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And my feeling is that if you have an in protocol fault tolerance threshold, that creates clear opportunities for cartelization, and it is. It basically it provides users with less ability to react to attack than having client-side fault tolerance thresholds that let users, if there is some kind of cartel that's preventing liveness, they could readjust their thresholds and have another shot. So mostly it's have like economic reasons and kind of game theoretic reasons why the in-protocol fault tolerance threshold is not desirable.
Understood. I need to dig into those arguments, but so I have a first order understanding of what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. I hear you. Yeah. That sounds reasonable.
Cool. So go ahead.
Yeah. So the main outline for the liveness strategies that that I'm working on is that I'm using fault detection and fault attribution, and basically the rejection of faults, or really the refusal of nodes to receive messages from nodes that they mark faulty, in order to provide kind of a basis for making decisions, or for coordinating validators, correct validators in their production of messages in order to create a particular shape of messages. So the way that fault attribution works is basically like if you expected to receive a message from a validator and you don't, and you mark them as faulty. And if you expected a validator to receive a message from you and they don't, then you mark them as faulty. And from any protocol state, we can kind of see from the latest messages, which validators have marked which validators as faulty. And we can draw from this a kind of connectivity graph, which is for every, where you have an undirected edge between any two validators that haven't marked each other as faulty. And edges that are, nodes that are connected by an edge in the connectivity graph are successfully sending each other messages. And as soon as one of them fails to send or receive a message, then they'll mark each other as faulty. And in the, just in the synchronous network, you can do it perfectly reliably. Like you know how long you have to wait before you know for a fact that someone who was supposed to send you a message didn't, and it's therefore faulty. So in a synchronous network,
you're depending upon knowledge of a receipt of a message from a validator you sent the message to, in terms of an ACK. So every message gets an ACK.
Implicitly, right? So if I send a message to a validator as a validator, then I expect them, when they make their new message, to include it in their justification. Assuming that they haven't marked me as faulty. So there's kind of implicitly an ACK. It's not like any protocol message. It's just in the justification of this. Just ordinary.
Okay. I thought that was going to be what you said. I just wanted to be clear. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so with a synchrony assumption, we can faulty nodes, correct nodes will never mark each other as faulty. So if we assume for now that everyone has knowledge of the synchrony bound, this is like the simple version of the protocol, like the first kind of version of the protocol. Correct nodes will never mark each other as faulty. And then faulty nodes, they basically get to decide which nodes will mark them as faulty. And then after they're marked as faulty, they never get to communicate with those nodes again, at least not directly, right? They may be able to communicate with them through the inclusion of their messages and justifications of other validators. So, for example, validator A marks validator C as faulty, but validator A and validator B are connected, and validator B and validator C are connected. Then, with a little bit of latency, validator A will hear from validator C whenever they hear from validator B. And so the direct communication doesn't happen between validators that mark each other as faulty. Indirect communication can if there's a path to the connectivity graph between those validators. And so from the fault attribution and rejection kind of strategy, what we get is eventually a stable connectivity graph, because faulty validators basically spend their ability to be faulty, right? As they show faults, the correct nodes mark them as faulty, and that's kind of not a reversible thing. And so faulty nodes spend their faults, and eventually we get a stable connectivity graph. And then based on this stable connectivity graph, the correct nodes can coordinate to make a decision, because all correct nodes see the same connectivity graph eventually, because they're all connected to each other, and therefore they're all part of the same connected component, and so they see the same connectivity graph, at least that connected component that they're all part of. And this kind of gives them a basis to coordinate their plans, and for them to be able to plan when they make their blocks in a way that is kind of guaranteed to work, because because the connectivity graph is stable, any connection in the graph has reliable message passing, And if it didn't, then it wouldn't be stable. But we kind of have this theorem that eventually it's stable. And so because it's eventually stable, and the correct nodes eventually see the same connectivity graph, they can all make plans to send messages. And as long as those plans, the plan to make messages only ask them to send messages along the edges of the connectivity graph, i.e., validator A only has to send a message to validator B if validator A is connected to validator B, then we'll be able to successfully execute that plan. And I have a description of plans that are live. Well, firstly, let me describe what a plan is. A plan is a directed graph. Let's, for now, assume that the nodes of the graph are the validators, and then there's like an edge from a directed edge from validator A to validator B. If A is supposed to make a message after validator B's message. So, A's message justification points to validator B's message, if everything goes according to plan. And so if you have directed graphs where every node has at least one edge outgoing, you're going to get at least a cycle in there. This kind of this graph will describe a kind of periodic block production schedule. And if the graph is live if the plan is live and we successfully execute the plan, then we'll have liveness. And so I have like a particular category or like a class of or a set of plans or descriptions of plans, which any plan that satisfies its description is live. It kind of goes like this. Firstly, two nodes in the graph are at the same time if they have the same parents and children. And the graph is live if it has enough weight. So if the validators in the plan have enough weight, and if every node in the plan are connected, and if all the parents and children of every node are at the same time. And so meaning that like any two nodes that are children of a node have the same parents and children. And so this kind of describes like both a chain and also a two chain where there's like two blocks at every height and they each reference the two blocks at the previous height and the two blocks at the later height, each reference them. It also describes a fully connected graph where everyone kind of is meant to receive every message from everyone. So there's a whole broad class of plans that have this property that all the parents and children of every node are at the same time. And these are all, if there's enough weight in these graphs and they're connected, then they're live. And you can kind of see this because if nodes have the same children and parents, then they're going to have the same estimator, and everyone who is based on them is going to have the same estimator. Or at least they'll agree on any majority-driven properties. If it's not strictly the same, as long as the estimator is majority-driven, then all the majority-driven properties will be satisfied by all these messages because they have the same justifications. So there's the setup basically is we use fault attribution to eventually achieve a stable connectivity graph. And with the stable connectivity graph, we can make a plan that requires the validator send messages only if they're connected, and which is live by virtue of kind of cycling through the validators and having them agree. And so at the end of the day, the stable connectivity graph allows us to successfully execute a plan, and as long as we choose our plan carefully, we're gonna have liveness. And that's kind of the outline for the synchronous network. And the key thing is that we basically have this planner that takes the connectivity graph and returns a plan. And different validators who see the same connectivity graph will have the same plan. When they have the same plan, they're able to wait for each other to receive the messages and successfully execute that plan. So yeah, I hope that's more or less clear, and I hope it's like, and also notably, there's no in protocol fault tolerance threshold. We kind of are just like optimistically going to create a plan that has as much weight as possible. And so, if we have a larger connected component, then we have we can reach higher fault tolerance thresholds than if we have a smaller connected component. And that fault tolerance threshold isn't part of the protocol. Instead, the validators have a kind of a greedy strategy for getting as much fault tolerance as possible. And the nice thing about the approach is basically that it's based on fault detection, it's on protocol fault tolerance threshold, and so it kind of fits very nicely with the rest of the philosophy of the protocol. The less nice thing about the approach is that it uses a synchrony assumption.
Maybe I misunderstood. So what do you mean by in protocol fault tolerance?
Yeah, I mean, so if in traditional consensus protocols, there's like a 1/3 fault tolerance, meaning that like more than 1/3 of nodes can break the protocol guarantees. In CVC Casper, we have this security parameter T, and it takes T faults to break the guarantee, but different clients can use different Ts. And so instead of it being in the protocol or protocol wide, it's client side. It's not that the fault tolerance threshold isn't in the protocol. It's just that every client chooses a different one. And so, it's a variable in the protocol.
So then the error correcting codes does not include a in protocol fault tolerance in that sense. I thought you were saying
my understanding.
I thought you were saying something else. No, that's not what happened. So in particular, if you look carefully at the papers that I sent you, your connectivity graph derives exactly from their the sphere that they build. So and they build that sphere by detecting the faults as they happen, not by any sort of fault tolerance threshold. They just like when a fault happens, then that something is outside of the sphere. And the sphere is exactly the same thing as the sort of constraints that you're labeling in terms of parent and height.
But you need like a certain threshold of the shares in order to make the error correcting. To get to like recover the code.
No. The only reason you need the what the error correcting code does is it describes the it describes how many deltas from connectivity you can accept. So over it's like it's exactly the kind of constraint that you're talking about. It's like you're only allowed to have so much before you're going to. And that's going to be
dynamic.
And the delta is dynamic. Yes, exactly. So
interesting.
The thing that you're how do I say it? You're describing the connectivity graph is the stable connectivity graph is finding a viable sphere, right? And in fact, there's a result that they have, which is that if the sphere doesn't have certain characterizations, it's not viable in terms of providing termination of the protocol, right? That's what liveness is. So it's this: if the sphere doesn't have certain characteristics, it's not live, and they have a theorem that gives you that, and that's exactly the point of the work, is that you're going to you have to find some kind of bound, right? That's really your stability condition is equivalent to finding some kind of bound around the amount of coordination you're willing to do. But we should dive into this now that your thoughts are. Have you written them down?
Yeah, but not at the level of like formality that I'm super comfortable with. But yeah, I've written it down, and you know, in English, and I'm happy to share that.
Okay, yeah, because I think we can draw a direct line, and if we can't, then you know we've learned something. But I think we can draw a direct line between the stable connectivity graph that you've got, and the sphere, any sphere that's workable, that sort of lives within a certain number of changes from you know from a viable option, right? So if you have to have too many changes or too much coordination, then you know that the thing won't it won't be live because there's the possibility of things being screwed up somewhere else while you're correcting over here.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, this is all very intuitive. I'd like to get to calculation.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so you know, I definitely also rely on the stability notion, and you know, just for the analysis, I'm not actually 100% sure if I really need as much stability as I actually am using. In fact, I have an intuition that it depends on the plans, and that some plans have much more fault tolerance than others to this kind of change of the connectivity graph.
Got it.
And in the partially synchronous model, I also get stability, but instead of getting stability forever, I get stability for long enough. With partial synchrony, you can't really be sure that correct nodes won't mark each other as faulty, except for eventually. And so, you know, by having like an increasing timeout of how long you're willing to accept waiting for them. So in a partially synchronous network, what I do is instead of just permanently marking nodes as faulty, you mark them as faulty for some time, and then you forgive them, mark them as for forgiveness, and then reconnect. And then after, if they become faulty again, then you mark them as faulty for longer before you forgive them and reconnect. And so that eventually we have a stable connectivity graph for long enough by a very similar argument. Only, you know, or long enough basically means for some arbitrary number of messages k, or for some arbitrary amount of execution of a plan. And that's it's more elegant because, you know, we don't need to have an assumption about the message arrival time. And so it's, you know, a much more general solution. On the other hand, and the argument is very similar. Basically, we have a stable connectivity graph eventually for long enough, and then we use that to execute a plan, which is live by the same kind of argument. In the partial synchronous model, the calculation for determining how long you wait before receiving messages is a little bit more complicated than in the synchronous model. Basically, because there might be clock drift, and there might be, you know, there's a message delays are variable instead of being fixed.
Yeah.
But it's very, very much the same kind of setup where we have a stable connectivity graph eventually based on fault detection and banning of faulty nodes, at least for a time before you forgive them. And eventually we have the property that like eventually correct nodes stop marking each other as faulty, and eventually correct nodes forgive each other. Which kind of allows the correct nodes to all see the same connectivity graph and to coordinate on the execution of a plan.
But in this, everybody's trusting that everybody's clock is reasonable.
No. We have I have like right now I've done it with they just have to be big O linear in each other. So they don't have. So I have I don't at all assume they're synchronized. I don't at all assume they're going at the same rates. I just assume they're kind of like, I guess, asymptotically quasi-linear in each other's rates. So that I can so that big O of, one clock in terms of another is linear.
Okay, cool.
But I would prefer to have a more general assumption. But even with the linearity assumption, linearity assumption is already a little bit challenging for me to do the waiting time calculations for, and so I kind of just stopped there. But I do have eventually this dream that I'll be able to have a special relativity or general relativity kind of synchrony assumption. Because
Yeah.
a lot more appropriate.
Yeah. Cool.
And I think that it should be totally possible. It's just a matter of calculating estimators for message arrival times based on these assumptions about how time works.
All right. Now we're getting into the good area. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I like the idea of the planner and the idea that we're targeting executing a plan, because it lets us explore all this trade-off surface that we've been talking about for a while about latency, finality versus overhead versus number of validators.
Yeah. Are you in Seattle anytime soon?
I'm not planning on being, but I'm going to go to Burning Man, and so I'm going to be in the West Coast pretty soon. But I'm not planning on going to Seattle. But
when is Burning Man?
It's this Sunday until the following Sunday.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool. And but doesn't that overlap with the Web3?
No, Web3 is now.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It overlaps a bit with Berlin, but which is Friday to Sunday.
Right. Awesome. Wow, really interesting, Casper. This is.
Yeah, I'm excited for I'm excited to write up this specification in excruciating detail. I think I have all the elements of the solution, and I think I've checked everything, and I'm ready to write it down. But I started to write it down, and then realized that I had to change it, and it's always so much work to write things in the kind of set theory that I'm writing everything in. But it's going to help.
Learn to, there are more rich settings than set theory.
I know.
Anyway, that's good. This is great. This is very exciting stuff. I would like to dive in and do some more direct comparison of the two approaches. I think actually, these comparative studies are very interesting because you learn a lot. One of the things I learned so much in the square root calculation was, by analyzing the gaps between the consensus that arises as a result of the square root and what Casper needs to do, things came really crisp.
Yeah, I love the square root construction and would love to take a more close look at it.
Oh yeah, well, the slides are up. So, but I'm just saying the comparative analysis is where things
did
you
tweet the slides, or how am I gonna find them?
So I'm not sure what version that you saw last. There's not much. There's only a little bit of differences, if there are any differences. Awesome. I've got to get over to stand up in just a few minutes, so I'm gonna jump off here. But enjoy Web3.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. See.
All right. Ciao.
I'm not going to be here next week, but I'm going to try to get back to making it regularly.
Awesome.